What is spirit of hartshorn? A short essay by Bruce Mills, otherwise known as the obligate pedestrian. Many 21st century web resources state that the spirit of hartshorn is a roughly 28% solution of ammonium, blunt and specific. The etymology of the archaic term is that an impure and inconsistent version was once derived by distilling the antler of the red deer. I see this as the wrong way around. It is biased to the idea that the 21st century definition of a 17th century term should overrule the 17th century sources. Andrew Urey, Dictionary of Chemistry and Mineralogy, 1831, has under spirit of hartshorn, see ammonia, without further explanation. The article on ammonia is interesting, but it does not clarify spirits of hartshorn. However, it does suggest that the 19th century agreed with the 21st century. Chambers' Cyclopedia 1735, spirit is a general term used by distillers for any distilled liquor that is neither oil nor phlegm. Chambers also says per se in chemistry is used when a body is distilled singly and without the usual addition of other matter to raise it. The genuine spirit of hartshorn is then said to be hartshorn distilled per se, as an example. Some sources seem to suggest that spirit of hartshorn and oil of hartshorn is the same thing. Oil of hartshorn comes from the destructive distillation of the red deer antler, but it is not clear to me that it is really the same thing. Robert Bossie, 1717 to 1777, The Elaboratory Laid Open, or The Secrets of Modern Chemistry and Pharmacy Revealed, containing many particulars extremely necessary to be known to all practitioners of medicine, 1758. Several dictionaries list elaboratory as an obsolete form of laboratory. The etymology is one of Latin elaboratus, the past participle of elaborare, to exert oneself. Hence, since in English the word becomes labour, it makes sense to drop the E and use laboratory. Not entirely different from dropping the L in alchemy to make chemi and chemistry, it also has a curious resonance with elaborate, which makes sense for a laboratory. On page 35, in the introduction to the elaboratory, there is a section opening with the italics, an improved apparatus for the more commodious and advantageous distillation of volatile spirits from hartshorn, bones, or any other proper animal substance by use of a worm as a refrigeratory. I expect that the worm is a thin tube shaped into a helix for sending fluids through for cooling, hence refrigeratory, and I confirm this from looking up the literature on traditional brewing. There is no particular advantage other than compactness for having this rather than a straight tube. However, that advantage is sufficient in most cases to prescribe such a structure. The details go as: a large iron pot must be first provided of the following form. The body of the pot must be a cylindrical figure with a concave bottom and converging at the top so as to make a kind of wide conical neck. Into this neck must be inserted a tubulous arm, which is to serve, instead of the head used in common stills, to convey the vapour into the worm of the refrigeratory. The height from the bottom of the pot to the beginning of the converging part or neck may be 4 feet and the diameter 2.5 feet. The length of the converging part or neck may be 2 feet and the diameter of it at its joining with the pot at the top or mouth of it 1 foot. The length of the arm may be 1 foot 8 inches and the diameter of it at its joining with the pot 4 inches and diminishing gradually to 2.5 inches at the other end. This arm must slope downward in such a manner that any fluid which shall be condensed in it will run out at the end. That is to say, the axis of the cone formed by this arm must decline 2 inches from the horizontal plane. The edge of the pot at the top of the neck must be dilated and turned outward, and a groove must be made in it to receive a flat cover of lead. In the body of the pot must be inserted 3 trunnions of about 6 inches length. They must be strong enough to bear the weight of the pot when it is hung in the brickwork by their means. They should be placed at equal distances a little below the part of the cylindrical body where the neck begins to form itself. The groove in the neck should be filled with a solid piece of lead exactly fitted and cemented to it, In this, another groove must be cut to receive a leaden cover adapted to it so as not to make a perfectly close joint, which may be easily done by beating the cover after it is placed in the groove till it fit in every part. The cover must be made of lead, about 1/4 inch in thickness, and a bow handle must be fixed in the middle of it. End of quote. Actually, Bossie continues on for some time describing further details. I cannot but think there is an error in this description where it says so as to not make a perfectly close joint, which is achieved by battering lead against lead. It sounds rather like he meant to say so as to make a perfectly closed joint by this process. Salt of hartshorn is said to be baking ammonium, that is, ammonium carbonate, which was used in baking before sodium bicarbonate or baking soda. Sodium carbonate is a direct poison. Ammonium carbonate apparently generates carcinogenic chemicals when baked in bread. The modern view of stating the chemical formula for something is anachronistic when applied to, say, 14th century chemistry, alchemy if you prefer. Firstly, the modern set of elements was only confirmed around 1930 and was definitely still in flux during the 1800s, but also the confidence in the abstract theory was rightly rather low. So most materials and rules were referred directly to the laboratory process. Rather than say it is such and such a material, or even give a definitive test, a material is described in terms of where the raw materials were sourced, how it is prepared, plus tests on top of that to make sure everything was as required to provide a consistent result. A material was classified by its properties. Classifying by its elements does not define the material due to the existence of allotropes and isomers. It is often claimed that the law of definite proportions, that substances can only form from a definite ratio of definite elements, rules. This is the core of the theory of stoichiometry. However, substances that do not conform are just called non-stoichiometric compounds. For example, iron can have oxidation states of 2+ or 3+, leading to ferrous and ferric compounds. Some materials do not even have any definite proportion. For example, when an element might randomly use one of multiple oxidation states within the bulk of the material. While in the 21st century terminology, many chemical materials are referred to by the name of an alchemical material whose main component was the chemical material, this does not mean that the alchemical material was simply an impure form of the chemical material. What are called impurities in chemistry were often an important component of the material in alchemy. That an alchemical material was expressed as prime in alchemy but as a compound in chemistry does not make the alchemical material a bad attempt at chemistry. The full story of this is more subtle, but for example, salt is treated as a singular material in baking because of how it presents. Also, iron can be thought of as steel without the carbon. It's a matter of point of view. Partington states that Robert Dossie, 1717 to 1777, gives various preparations including spirit of hartshorn and its sophistication using quicklime. In the preface to his The Elaboratory, Robert Dossie states that pharmacists and chemists tend to keep things secret because this improves the security of their commerce. This was in 1758. Consider this when it is stated by some in the late 1600s and early 1700s that alchemists and chymists keep things secret. The idea of keeping trade secrets is not in the slightest uniquely characteristic of the alchemist as opposed to the chemist. Also, claiming that you are revealing arcane secrets is a good way to promote sales of your book, so it is not correct to view any of Boyle et al. As being objective observers of the amount to which alchemists or chemists did or did not keep their secrets, nor to the morals of them doing so. According to Bossie, spirit of hartshorn is not simply an ammonium solution. From the elaboratory laid open, section 3, examination of the sameness of several substances which make a part of the materia medica under different denominations without any essential diversity being necessary for determining how far many substitutions are allowable. Several pages later, if to the volatile salt of sal ammoniacum obtained from the eastern kind the oil distilled from the hartshorn be added, the salt will be perfectly resembling that extracted from the horn. With respect to the pure volatile alkaline salt of any animal or part of an animal, the volatile salt obtained from sal ammoniacum might well be substituted, and the same holds good with regard to what is called volatile spirit, which is, in fact, only the salt dissolved in water. But those which are used in medicine under the name of particular salts or spirits are greatly replete with the distilled oil that arises along with the salts, and which is not, as the burnt oil in the case of the fixed alkaline salts of vegetables, either irrelative or inadequate to the intention of the medicine, but on the contrary a proper and essential part of it. And therefore, volatile spirit of sal ammoniacum cannot be substituted for spirit of hartshorn without a material defect, unless an equivalent quantity of the same kind of oil be previously conjoined with it. But if a volatile spirit or salt be drawn from any other sort of animal substance, and be replete with an oil of the same kind, in a state equally or more suitable to the intention of this medicine, they may well be substituted for those of hartshorn, vipers, or any other particular materials which the fancy of persons ignorant in principles of this kind may direct. And the substitution of any other volatile spirit instead of spirit of hartshorn, provided it be duly replete with a volatile salt and distilled animal oil of the more ethereal kind, may indeed be considered as a fraud in commerce, but it is in fact an improvement in medicine. End of quote. As a starting point for chemical reverse engineering, it is reasonable to suggest that sal ammoniacum is essentially ammonium chloride because it is described in the older text as being a naturally occurring mineral, originally sourced from the East exclusively, whose habit and context fairly clearly identifies it as a specific rare mineral that is found near guano deposits as well as volcanic vents and coal seams. It is composed of fairly pure ammonium chloride. It is definitely possible that what could be called impurities and inclusions in the 21st century terms were part of the presumption of the material in the 18th century terms. However, longer reading of the details of the relation between the materials suggests that this is not the case here with sal ammoniacum. This is strongly backed by the fact that Europe discovered how to manufacture sal ammoniacum from more readily available materials and reported that it was quite the same as the Eastern material. So given that alchemical sal ammoniacum is the same material as chemical ammonium chloride, then spirit per campanum of sal ammoniacum is an ammonium solution in water. The 28% clause falls out here through natural accident, not here investigated. Bossie states that the spirits of hartshorn is not the same as spirit of sal ammoniacum, and that the difference is important in medical applications. But Bossie also states that if the volatile salt of ammoniacum has the oil distilled from spirit of hartshorn added to it, then it becomes the same as spirits of hartshorn. Hence, to Bossie, spirits of hartshorn is a volatile salt of sal ammoniacum mixed with the oil distilled from hartshorn, that is, ammonium and oil. But what oil? In some alchemical literature, oil means sulphur means the principle of fire. Sulphur is known as the rock that burns, but this does not seem to be the intention here, since Bossie states that the oil comes from dry distillation of deer antler. The Collins Dictionary, 21st century, states that the volatile salt is another name for ammonium carbonate, but also claims that another name for it is spirit of hartshorn. However, it mentions ammonium carbonate in alcohol and aqueous ammonia. Ammonium carbonate is also known as baker's ammonia, which is a leavening agent, but the Cookopedia states that the oil of hartshorn is a crude animal oil obtained from the destructive distillation of deer bones and horns, which seems more reasonable. Bossie does not say that it is destructive distillation, but the difference between dry distillation and dry destructive distillation is only that in destructive distillation a new chemical is formed, which is not only in some sense a subjective matter, but it is also a distinction that Bossie would be unlikely to make. The salt of hartshorn is baker's ammonia, ammonium carbonate, but the Cookopedia states that spirit of hartshorn is merely an aqueous solution of ammonia, in clear conflict with Bossie. Bossie in this case has the casting vote. Reading up on recipes used in the 21st century by deer hunters for boiling antlers and experiences with bone broth and chasing up components of bone broth in the general chemical and culinary literature, It seems that collagen might be a major component of the oily substance that rises to the top of the bone broth. What is left is more of the calcium and inorganics. According to some modern research, there could be health benefits to collagen, making sense out of Bossie's comment that for medical applications, the spirit of hartshorn with oil is required rather than just ammonia solution. Of course, collagen is a protein and not an oil, so that question of what makes the oil is still to be resolved, not to mention that the definition of oil came later. Further investigation in the cooking literature results in the conclusion that the oil is tallow. Although that is not a precise chemical term, rather it is mainly triglycerides derived from stearic and oleic acids, a class of fats, not a specific fat. Tallow has a long history of use as a skin moisturizer, which gets back to the assertion of Bossie that hartshorn with the oil has important pharmacological properties that mere spirit of cell ammonia does not have. It is also interesting that it is stated that true spirit of hartshorn is obtained by dry distilling of deer antler with no other materials, so nothing else was added to make the oil. The mixture of ammonium and oil is likely to produce quaternary ammonium compounds, for example involving a nitrogen atom with several organic radicals attached. Some of these have antibacterial effects or can be used as detergent. It was reported that spirits of hartshorn could be used as a cleaning agent, so this analysis fits the reported usage. Ammonia itself in chemistry is just NH3. The quaternary ammonium compounds are nitrogen with 4 attachments instead of 3. It will be an ion that can be stabilized by the presence of chlorine, which brings us back to cell ammoniac being ammonium chloride, which is NH4Cl. When ammonium chloride dissolves in water, it creates NH4 plus and Cl minus ions and is mildly acidic. From all the above, it seems that spirit of hartshorn, as described by Robert Dossie, could be used to manufacture detergents, antibacterial agents, and a reasonably effective skin cream, as well as smelling salts. Bossie also says, page 87 to 88 of the Elaboratory, now all distilled oils of animal substance being likewise of the same nature, except that by the action of fire some are higher exalted, and gaining a more ethereal nature, become less liable to putrefaction, while others, being less changed from their original grosser state, retain some tendency to putrefy. It must appear that there can be no difference in volatile spirits, but in their being charged, in a greater or lesser proportion, with oils that vary only in their exaltation, or approach to the ethereal state, in the greater degree of which consists their medicinal excellence, as may be easily granted when it is considered in what intention they are taken. If, therefore, it should be manifest from experiment that volatile spirit extracted from prepared bones or any other animal substance contains a more ethereal oil than spirit drawn from hartshorn, it must consequently be concluded to be a more efficacious medicine, as well as a much more grateful and convenient one, on the account above mentioned. End of quote. This emphasizes, among other things, that to Bossie spirits contain some amount of oil without ceasing to be spirits. He describes oils as exalted here with the principle, as discussed in modern terminology, of being chemically stable and not subject to bacterial action. There's a one meaning that is frequently given to the sense of a material being pure, simply that it is chemically stable. It does not change over time when subjected to heat, though it might yet be corrupted by other materials, such as gold can be dissolved by aqua regia. The matter of oil being more ethereal is interesting. Putrefaction might mean actual bacterial action, or it could, in 21st century terms, mean oxidation. It is possible that this is a reference to oils that have been distilled at a higher temperature, thus killing bacteria, or perhaps being less viscous and simpler compounds with higher alkanes, which would be less attractive to bacteria. In conclusion, spirit of hartshorn is given multiple meanings by multiple people depending in particular on the century and context in which they were trained. To Bossie, it was ammonium with water and oil. In other contexts, it can be ammonium in water. The related cell ammoniac has a much more singular meaning in the 21st century terminology as being ammonium chloride. but in many ways Bossie meant literally, by definition, that which is obtained by dry distilling deer horn. I would like to finish off this essay with a broad statement about the relation between chem, alchemy, chemistry and chemistry. I've said earlier that the core ideas of these just merged into each other. In physics this also occurred, but for the most part the different theories replace one another but are still seen today as being theories of physics, but for this topic that we can call material studies. In particular, the study of the non-geometric properties of materials, it seems that there is no umbrella term. Instead, as ideas changed, the term for the topic as a whole changed. Often the claim is that this is due to their being based on entirely different conceptions. But chem and alchemy, which are often seen as continuous, actually cover a variety of ideas, including the emergence of the sulfur-mercury theory of metallurgy and the study of 4 elements and the 3 principles, and then the relatively briefly lived study of the 5 materials that seem to have come under the name of chemistry. The 5 materials came from an attempt to form a unified theory of the 4 and the 3, and then there was a general acceptance that the number of prime materials might be very large. But in all of this, very little of fundamental change had occurred suddenly in the outlook. It was still a search for the prime materials, and those prime materials were only confirmed in the 20th century, which was the advent of quantum chemistry. So until around 1930, it was all just about conjectured decompositions of practical materials. The periodic table was just the most successful variant of a large number of tables of materials that tried to find regularities to all the materials and properties. The core lesson for me in this discussion of hartshorn is that the 21st century chemistry tries to identify the materials of the alchemists in terms of being a simple formula in the contemporary list of prime materials. And when an alchemical material turns out to be inconsistent in those terms, or complicated and compound, the claim is that this in and of itself is a deficiency of the earlier theory. But this is anachronistic and taken out of cultural context. Spirit of hartshorn was, quite literally, what you get from distilling deer antlers. This was the material that varied from one deer to another, rather like the cubit length in Egypt, but it was still spirits of hartshorn. A similar issue comes up with the Mpemba effect. The heating cycle of practical water might cause the rate of freezing to change, even perhaps when there is no significant change in chemical composition. And again, diamond and graphite are the same fundamental material, but the atoms are joined up differently. So the actual components in terms of prime materials is not the end of the needed information about the materials. The thrust of this essay is to properly understand that by spirit of hartshorn was meant literally and definitively that which you get from distilling deer antler, and is not well described as a bad attempt at defining ammonia, any more than ammonia is a bad attempt at describing spirit of hartshorn. Until we can actually see things in terms of the way that they were seen in, say, the 1500s, it is not possible to say that we've really understood the history. Much of this is about forgetting modern chemistry, which, as typically taught, is a highly abstract and theoretical topic in which laboratory experience is mainly about getting a bottle with a formula written on it and combining it with another bottle with another formula written on it, while alchemy was about working from common materials and identifying them by properties that could be established using the human senses, such as smell and taste. In the end, spirits of hartshorn is and only is distilled deer antler.